Liberty Counsel comes to the aid of a 15-year-old boy who was bullied by the superintendent because of his view on homosexual adoption. I'm Matt Staver, founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel. Joining me is Matt Barber, vice president of Liberty Counsel Action. Matt, this is the classic bullying where a superintendent literally bullies a 15-year-old boy because he wrote an article in the newspaper. There was a pro and con article in the school newspaper regarding homosexual adoption, and he was opposed to it based upon his biblical view. And by the way, this was supervised by another teacher. So this teacher is part of all of this process, and this young boy submits his view, and there's someone else that submits their view, and the superintendent drags in Brandon and bullies him, saying that he was offended at the article.
Yeah, and then if they issue a public statement saying that they sincerely apologize because one young homosexual fella calls the school and complains and demands that this teacher, who is simply exercising, journalistic objectivity and integrity here, overseeing the two sides of the debate over homosexual adoption, and then she gets, raked over the coals, and this homosexual is demanding that she be fired. But Matt, that goes back to what we have talked about over and over again here. Those who are proponents who say that they're fighting for tolerance and diversity, who oppose hate, constantly reveal themselves to be the most hateful, intolerant among us. And here, this whole community of liberals and homosexual activists and the school superintendent is bullying this 15-year-old boy. These adults are bullying this 15-year-old boy simply because he wrote and pretty well articulated the Judeo-Christian position on sexual morals.
Yeah, this was a situation that happened in Shawano High School in Shawano, Wisconsin. And Brandon Wegner, who's a 15-year-old, was punished and brought into the superintendent office and raked over the coals. Now, there's a school newspaper, and there's a faculty advisor for that school newspaper. So there was a request to have both of these sides presented in the newspaper. And Brandon presents his side, supporting it from a biblical standpoint that homosexuality is contrary to the Bible, and therefore homosexual adoption would be wrong. Some other student sends their article in and supports it. And then there's a father who is homosexual, who has a son in this school, and then he gets upset when he sees this, and then he complains to the school. He wants the teacher that was the faculty advisor fired, and then the superintendent, he comes to, his name is Todd Carlson. He brings 15-year-old Brandon in, and he said that the column, quote, went against the bullying policy, close quote, and asked Brandon if he regretted writing it. Brandon said he did not regret writing it and that he stood behind his beliefs. The superintendent, Carlson, then told him that he had to to be one of the most ignorant kids to try to argue with him about this topic, telling a student that he's got to be ignorant on this issue because he supports biblical and long-standing traditional values in homosexuality. He says then, quote, we have the power to suspend you if we want to. And he also said that the column had personally offended me, speaking of the superintendent, so I know you offended other people.
Yeah, Todd Carlson, superintendent, real tough guy there, isn't he? Picking on a 15-year-old kid, and says that this article articulating the Judeo-Christian view on sexual ethics violates the school's bullying policy. The irony here is palpable, and there are people, this homosexual activist father of some little boy who's got some 24-year-old little partner or something, is demanding that this teacher be fired merely for being the editor and allowing a two-sided argument to go forward on the case. She stepped back, objectively allowed this to occur. You know who needs to consider resigning here is the superintendent. He is way out of line. Not only has he violated law, the United States Constitution and Brandon's First Amendment rights, he is bullying this young man, intimidating him, threatening him with suspension for exercising his First Amendment rights. This is one of the grossest violations we've seen in a long time. This superintendent is really out of line.
It really is out of line. Liberty Counsel, we've sent a demand letter to the school demanding that the superintendent and the school officials apologize for this over-the-top behavior. rather than Brandon. I mean, can you imagine? Brandon is a 15-year-old. He's writing in a school newspaper. There's a pro and con. This is a newspaper. What happened to their freedom of speech? What happened to having open and robust debate? And so there's a pro and a con, and he's being asked to write a column. He's not going out and then demeaning individuals. He's writing a column in a newspaper, and the superintendent calls him in and says that he's ignorant and that violates the bullying policy. That's just absurd.
Yeah, we're surprised every time this happens. I don't know why we continue to be surprised. Hy Feldblum, President Obama's recess appointment for the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission, has said that this is a zero-sum game. From their perspective, there aren't two sides to this debate. Right. This is pure totalitarian censorship. They want to shut down any public expression of the traditional Judeo-Christian sexual ethic when it comes to homosexual perversion and the pushing by radical homosexual activists of that perversion on the rest of the community. It's a zero-sum game. Somebody has to win. Somebody has to lose. Here's another example of it. Complete and utter censorship. Next thing you know, they're going to be demanding, that the Bible be censored and removed from any public forum because it condemns homosexual conduct.
Yeah, well, no question about it, because he's actually quoting from some of the scriptures in the Bible. And if this is violating the bullying policy, then the Bible violates the bullying policy. So if these students get together and they have a Bible club on campus and they're having this discussion about homosexuality from a biblical perspective, if it's bullying to write this in the newspaper, it's going to be bullying to have it discussed in an open meeting with other fellow students in the Bible club.
Excellent point. The Bible itself, under this criteria, would violate the school's bullying policy. We often say we call this a culture war. We call it a culture war for a reason. We don't understand that the other side here, they mean business. They mean to absolutely silence any opposition to their radical homosexual agenda. And this is just another example. And I don't know if you've noticed or not, but it seems like the examples are mounting. And at a faster pace, we're seeing more and more and more of this kind of bullying of students, Christian students, Jewish students, Orthodox Jewish students who embrace, again, the traditional biblical model of human sexuality. They are being bullied. It's happening across the country.
Well, that's why we have been very opposed to these bullying policies. Obviously, if you're talking about bullying in the sense of physically bullying, nobody's in favor of bullying. But we are in favor of free speech. And what ultimately happens is these bullying policies go beyond what you normally think of as bullying to reach otherwise protected, legitimate free speech, as in this particular case. This is clearly not violating the bullying policy, although the superintendent is trying to extract the bullying policy and apply it to this particular situation. But it's just like in 1973 when the homosexual lobby pressured the American Psychological Association to declassify homosexuality as a mental disorder. From that point on, there has been an outright political opposition to any research on the fact that homosexuality is a condition that you can change, that it is not static, it is not wired in your system where it is unchangeable, that you can change. Any researcher that wants to pursue that kind of research or even counsel in that kind of research is bullied by the APA and those professional organizations.
The science is clear. And, as evidenced by thousands of former homosexuals, we know that it's not easy, and the studies show that it's not easy. It's not always difficult, and leaving any sin lifestyle is difficult. But we know the science is clear. But they don't want the science to be put forward. They want to shut down any debate. They want to nip it in the bud.
Yeah, they're not interested in a real objective discussion. They're interested in dominance of their particular view, and that means a zero-sum game. There are winners, there are losers, and they want to win, and they want to silence those that have religious, Christian, moral beliefs such as Brandon. Well, we're not going to stand by and let him be bullied, so that's why we stood up and are standing up for Brandon. So give us a call if you know of situations like this at Liberty Counsel, 1-800-671-1776. And then you can also order this book by Ken Blackwell and Ken Klukowski called Resurgent. It's a great book, especially for the issues that we're facing this year in the political election cycle. It talks about some of the issues that are affecting our government here today, called Resurgent by Ken Blackwell and Ken Klukowski. Go to Liberty Counsel's website, lc.org, sign up for the Liberty Alert, and you can make an online credit card contribution right there at Liberty Counsel's website at lc.org.